all the different documents. So please check that out if you want like the slides, or there's a lot of resources there. In fact, maybe what I can do is just highlight, if I go over here, you should be able to access different resources from our office, color contrast, which I'm about to go into in a sec, document decision tree, and then I have some things on checkers and different articles. And there's a separate one for AI with different AI resources and things to check out. Um, so please look at those. I'm going to go back over here. So my name is Austin Stam. I'm the Digital Accessibility Instructional Specialist for Stanford University. I'm covering document accessibility tips and AI accessibility workflows. The agenda for today is I'm going to talk a little bit about myself briefly. We'll go into color accessibility, documents, looking at like document formats, accessibility prioritization, some screening techniques, and then we'll dive into AI and look at some AI accessibility workflows, looking at descriptive hyperlinks, accessible lists, and accessible images. And we'll maybe have some time for Q&A as well. Um, so just like a brief introduction about me, I have mild cerebral palsy, prosopagnosia, or face blindness and ADHD. When I went to public school in fourth grade, I had a really hard time, for example, with like poster board projects and handwriting. I remember one time I was taking notes on the board and the teacher came by my desk and said, "These notes are illegible. No one can leave for recess until Austin rewrites all the notes for the board." And I kept everybody late for recess and felt humiliated. And I was having a really hard time. And then in fifth grade, I went to a non-public school called Westmark, and they really embraced modifying assignments and adapting to student strengths. And instead of using a pencil to take notes, I used an AlphaSmart, which is like a word processing laptop. And I went from being the slowest note taker to one of the fastest. And then I also learned how to use Final Cut Pro to make movies instead of poster board projects. And that really helped me. And I actually got my bachelor's in film production. So hopefully that kind of just gives a little context of why it's important to think about how you can adapt your assignments, adapt your content materials to reach the widest range of learners or users possible. So looking at color accessibility a little bit here, some of the key practices, you want to provide sufficient contrast between the foreground text and background color, avoid using pastel or light versions of color, and use color in combination with unique symbols or other text information. I have some resources here from the WebAIM Contrast Checker, TPGI Color Contrast Analyzer, as well as Stanford has a color contrast checker as well that I linked to, which is for Stanford branded colors, but maybe at your institution or what you're working with, you could consider something as well, thinking about your branded colors and making them accessible. I think one reason that I'm bringing up color specifically is it's an easy way to be able to screen a document and determine is this document accessible or not, and make that determination. So I'm just going to briefly demo here the color contrast analyzer. And if I open up the app, it's for Mac or PC, you can go in using this little picker option, and I could use the dropper and just drop in on the black text. I can drop the other one here on the background of the dark blue, it tells me it's a 1.8 contrast ratio. It's 4.5 to 1 for regular text, 3 to 1 for large text, for meeting WCAG AA standard, so this doesn't meet it. However, if I were to use the second one here and drop into the yellow, we get a much higher contrast ratio that does meet the standards. So the point is as you're looking at your content, you could kind of be quickly doing this and incorporating it into your workflow to determine is a document accessible or a web page accessible with the color contrast. And I recommend doing that very early on in the process so you don't have to go back and remediate your theme later on. Looking at this example of like a class program, right? We have symbols, so like the circle is blue, but it's also a circle, so it's different than like this triangle, which is I think red. And so you can kind of tell like, okay, these are different colors and there's different symbols, so that helps make that determination. But if someone has some type of color blindness looking at the Mat Studio and Fitness Center, they're both using the same symbol in X. So in this case, that would be difficult to distinguish which one is which. One more example here, looking at like a pie chart. So having the labels on the pie chart can be really helpful because on the left, again, if someone has some type of color blindness, it may be hard to identify from the legend which one's referring to the first quarter. While on the right, because there's labels, there's a text equivalent. So even if someone's colorblind, there's another way of accessing that information. So I'll see in the chat here if there's any questions. I don't think there are, so we'll dive in more into document formats a little bit. So what format to choose for your document, and how can we easily kind of create accessible content when it comes to documents or your different materials? I think one thing to be thinking about is web pages are usually pretty easy to make accessible. Another option is like a Microsoft Word document. PDFs can pose different accessibility barriers. It can be harder to like change the font. So like if someone's accessing the PDF and they're dyslexic and they want to change the font style or something like that, that could be more difficult. PDFs can also compress when they're zoomed in, and they usually require a viewer, which may not be compatible with assistive technologies, even though the PDF was made accessible. So you want to consider providing your content in multiple formats that are accessible, and maybe not, focusing as much on the PDF, depending on what kind of content you're working with. So, like with Word documents, it's really easy to make a Word document accessible. They can also export to be an accessible PDF, so you could have two formats right there by using them. And Word has a built-in accessibility checker. When you look at like Google Docs, there's no way to create an accessible table in Google Docs, which is one barrier. While in Word, a regular simple table can be made accessible. There's also no accessibility checker in Google Docs, and Google Docs doesn't convert directly into an accessible PDF. Looking at PDF documents, you could be using something like InDesign or Word. If you're remediating a PDF, I put Equidocs, but I meant Adobe InDesign. Usually it would be one. There are other applications there like Equidocs or other platforms or applications you could use, but usually Adobe Acrobat Pro is the main one people are using. And if it's a really complex document, you may look at trying to get like a vendor or something like that. So when you're sharing documents, like I shared these different resources documents with you, I used a Word document, and being able to go in and actually make your Word document accessible, upload it to Google Drive, then people could convert it into a Google Doc. They could also go in and download the accessible Word document. So I recommend considering that as an option as well. So some key questions to kind of be asking when you're thinking about your content and how you can manage it is like, is this document needed? Maybe the document's out of date, right? So you could get rid of it. Is it being used frequently? So you want to prioritize the documents that are being used the most frequently. Is this content available in another format? Maybe you have a PDF and a web page, so you just get rid of the PDF and keep the web page. What platform was the document created in? So you could be using like Adobe Acrobat Pro. You could be looking at using, Microsoft Office or Adobe InDesign. You could go in there and make those accessible if you have access to the original file. Um, then the other thing to think about is, if is this document more complex, then you may want to consider a vendor or really remaking the content. That's another option too, as well, is if you have a lot of complex tables and things, maybe you could break them out into regular tables and kind of rework the document to make it easier to be accessible and maybe easier to access as well. So I'm just going to highlight here a couple of screening options to help you kind of determine, is a document accessible or not. And so one option to look at would be, if you're in Microsoft Word, you could go to Tools, check Accessibility. This will bring up the accessibility checker to help you make some determination like this document's not accessible. But you could also do View. And if you do View navigation panes and check that box, you could go over to the second option, which is the document map, and that will show any headings that are in the document. So if I do this with the second document here that is accessible, and I check uh, n- the navigation panes, we'll see here, here's the heading level 1, here are the different heading level 2s, and then we have some heading level 3s here. So what that kind of does is it lets you kind of see does this document have headings or not, and that can be a quick way of determining the level of accessibility of the document along with the accessibility checker. If you have access to Adobe Acrobat Pro, you can go in using show/hide side panels, accessibility tags, and this will bring up the tag structure of the document, which is used by assistive technology. That's how the content is read by assistive tech. And so this one has no tags, which means it's inaccessible. It also has no OCR. So if I try and highlight individual lines of text, I can't do that. It actually is all uh, uh, blocked together as one. But if I look at this other example here that's kind of, I called bad tags, I have individual lines of text that I can highlight. But when I look at the tag structure, I don't see like a heading level 1 or any headings. I see these figures, but if I go into like the properties of the figure, I don't see any alt text for the image being added in. So these are cues like, oh, this document's inaccessible. I should be thinking about how I can make this more accessible. Um, and then this last document here is like an accessible version where there's like an H1, there's different figures. Like the figure actually has alt text. So you can kind of see that there's structure there. And when you have that structure, that starts to show in the tag structure that this is an accessible document. Moving over to just talking again about different ways of prioritization and kind of decision tree. I put a link in from the webcamp to Indiana University. They have this decision tree is like publicly available, and it's also very similar to kind of those initial questions I was asking on the earlier slide. So this is like a more complex version if you wanted to go through, like, could this be made into a web page? How updated is this document? It kind of gives you different questions to think about when you're considering remediation and prioritization of your documents. Another one here is from Wake Forest University. They have this extreme PDF makeover edition. And so like the idea is going in and first identifying like what documents are just old that you could get rid of, what documents are you going to prioritize, and they break it down by different weeks of like kind of after you identify, then starting the remediation and going through the different steps of making your PDF documents accessible. So that's something to kind of consider as well. Um, so I'll just stop for a quick sec here, just check the chat, and then we'll go into some AI accessibility workflows if there's no questions. So I don't see any questions, so I will continue. If there are any, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So I'm going to kind of pivot from talking about document prioritization and identifying and screening different documents to looking more at AI and different sources resources you can use. So I'm going to be demoing using the AI playgrounds. But there are other, which is specific for Stanford affiliated folks, but there's a lot of different AI platforms like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Anthropic. And with ChatGPT, they also have, if you have access to it, they have custom ChatGPTs in their paid account. So you could be looking at specialized GPTs for accessibility, like Image Braille, which is designed to describe images. There's another one called Accessibility Copilot that's designed to provide feedback on code. There's also some that have been like OpenAI's Whisper and Adobe Premiere Pro that really specialize in generating transcripts and captions. I think one of the most more common ones probably now from Apple, if you have like the newer iPhone or something like that, Apple Intelligence has the ability to take a voice memo and immediately turn that into a transcript. So that's something to keep in mind as well. When it comes to this accessibility copilot, what it's able to do is kind of look at your code and then provide some type of feedback. I'm not going to be demoing this specifically right now, but that's something to consider if you are looking to try and get some feedback on code and try and help you identify some of the accessibility issues. That might be one to look at. I think another thing that's really important to note about using AI is the idea of like malicious compliance. And so like I look up here, there's like a captioning error. It says like NE when I'm talking about like heading levels. And basically if you think about captions, you want your captions to be accurate and be having include punctuation, which Google's auto-generated captions, which this is an image of, does not have any punctuation. It doesn't provide that. It also is not always 100% accurate. And if you think about how important accuracy is, if someone's accessing your content and they are deaf or they have hearing loss, it's really important that those captions be accurate and be reflecting what's there. If you think about like a 90% accuracy rate, that still means 1 out of every 10 words is wrong. So it'd be very hard to follow a conversation if you're missing a one word, 1 of every 10 words. So that's really important to consider. And then this bottom image is like a polar covalent bond and the hydrogen atoms bonding to an oxygen atom. And this is a description from PowerPoint using their AI. It just says a diagram of a bond. AI generated content may be incorrect. And that's kind of the point of this whole slide is that all AI generated content may be incorrect. So you should be checking it by and having a human review it before putting it up or using it to ensure that it is accurately reflecting the content that's there. So looking at some accessible solutions for AI, how could AI potentially speed up your workflow or process? We can start by looking at accessible lists. So you can basically you want your list to be programmatic lists, meaning that they're either structured in HTML or using in Word like the bulleted list option, so that you are having that structure of the different items of the list being specified. Like in Word, you wouldn't want to manually create your list or put in special characters because it's not really list. So I have an example here at the top with these 9 items, and it's just the screen reading software VoiceOver is displayed here, and it's just reading the first item. But on the bottom, because I used like the pre-formatted bulleted, or excuse me, numbered list, it says list of 9 items, and it will go through and identify each one of those items. And if someone's accessing the content with screen reading software and they are blind or have low vision, it can be really helpful to know the number of items in that list. And that's why you want to be providing that structure. So I think one way we could kind of go in and explore this a little bit is I have this list example here of just like the different states. And so I can go and put this into AI. And if I start a new chat with like Chat GPT, I can say, can you create an accessible uh, list using HTML for these items? And then I can go in and put the different items there. We could paste something like that in, and it will start to build out the list, and it will build it uh, each time I've done this, it makes it a little bit differently. But the idea is that you could be using like the list code to then make your list. And it could also make it as like a bulleted list if I asked it to make it bullets and be able to put that into like Word or something like that. So there's it's a way of speeding up the process if you had something like that going on. Funny because the previous time I did it, actually, it made a heading level 1 too for the item. Oh, it did here too. Okay, cool. Yeah, so like that's one example of kind of how you could be using it. I have another one here. If we jump over to talking about uh, descriptive links. So it's important to be providing a descriptive link. So you don't want like a long URL or something generic like click here, but usually about like 2 to 5 words that identifies where that link is going. You want to be kind of asking the question, will the reader know where they are going by just the link text alone? So I have this example here of some problematic links. And so you'll notice there's all these learn more items. And it's like learn more, learn more. And if you're navigating that, you would get lost and not know where you are because it's all the same name and it's not very clear. If you look at this other one here, the challenges of reimagining policing, that seems like it's kind of describing where the link is going. So that you want like some kind of description about where that link and where that content leads. So in this example, what I'm going to do is I can go over again and go to some links that I just took from the our website, the Office of Digital Accessibility, and I can go and put these links in. I can say, can you create a list with descriptive with a 2 to 5 descriptive hyperlink for each of these URLs. And then I can put in the different URLs and we'll see what it does. And so if I go over here, it's putting in like this one is going to the like Google Docs, and it's putting in the Google Docs accessibility tips. So it's able to describe what these links are. If you give it a lot of links, you could just want the descriptions themselves, but it's able to do something like that, which could help speed up the process if you're trying to make some type of index of links or a reference list. You could be using this to kind of help get some descriptions of the URL. So that's what you're pasting in as an example. Again, like I'll just check the chat to see if there's any questions. I'm going to move on talking about images a little bit. Looks like there's no questions. So again, if you have images, I mean, excuse me, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. So talking a little bit about images. So images not only provide some type of visual appeal, but they also convey a lot of times relevant information. And so making sure that when you're describing an image, you're using appropriate spelling, grammar, punctuation, concise, the fewest words possible, but a meaningful description and equivalent the same content or function. And so you'll notice here on the left, I have screen reading software accessing an image. It says 88image.jpg. You're currently on an image. And on the right, I have an image that says the flowers in bloom at the Stanford Oval. You are currently on an image. The screen reading software knows it's an image, so it's going to say you are currently on an image. But this description is kind of describing what that image is. The important part to really understand is that AI can't know your intention for the image. So in this case, it's talking about the flowers in bloom, but I could be talking about the building in the background or the mountain or the green grass. So whether this description is actually providing the appropriate meaningful content really depends on the author's intent, which is why you need to be reviewing the alt text and be considering what you feel is most relevant. Um, so when thinking about some workflows to maybe help speed up making accessible images or image descriptions, there's a lot of different Gen AI tools out there. Again, that you could be using to just upload an image to them, and then they'll be able to write an image description or alt text. I think one other thing to keep in mind is alt text is supposed to be brief, around like 125 characters or so. So trying to make sure that in your prompt you're asking it to be um, brief when it's creating a description, because a lot of times AI has a tendency to write a lot more, almost like an image description where you have like a paragraph below the text versus like an actual alt tag, which would just be much shorter, like a sentence or two. When it comes to that as well, you want to just be checking, as I said, and reviewing whatever descriptions the AI generates. And so there's a lot of use cases here for complex images. You can then like go in and get like a starting base, which to kind of edit from, and you could potentially put it into like a Word document and then have with headings and lists, and then have a decision tree created in there, or a description. So for example, here is this complex flow chart I got from a course I was working on. I was helping someone with, and we were trying to figure out how could we take this and make this accessible for someone to use using assistive technology like screen reading software. And what we did was we put this in Chat GPT, and then it started to develop some of the structure, and I edited it, and that gave us a starting basis. And that after me making some edits and changes, we got very quickly a really nice description of each part of that flow chart and having its own heading and structure there. So that's something to really think about when you are getting some of those complex flow charts, is trying to use Chat GPT as a first pass to kind of get you going, and it can kind of identify some of that different content, and then you could start to edit it and build in that structure. So I'll do a couple of examples here looking at different images. I think I have what's one of the cool things about um, the AI playgrounds is you can kind of compare two different models. So maybe what we could do is I can give it a prompt of please describe th this image. We can then go in and put, actually, before I do this, I want to show you. If I go back to my AI resources, there's this one here, Image Accessibility Creator. This is uh, a version from Arizona State University, which you can just upload an image and it will describe it. So I'm going to start with this one. And if I put in, for example, this example of the polar covalent bonds. Oh, I think that one maybe I didn't. Let me see. Oh, here, I can, I may not have put that in as the right format, so I'll just switch it over to this other one. We'll use the water cycle here. So if I use the water cycle, I can open that up, and then it will go in. One sec. Huh. I may need a refresh. Oh, there it goes. Okay, cool. And then so it has the water cycle there, and then it's going to start to create an image description for it. So what we'll see here is it's analyzing the image, and then it's going to use OpenAI's plugin to generate a long description and the alt and an alt text that you could start to edit. So I would imagine, this is not going to be 100% correct, but it's a starting place that you could then start to use to edit this. So it says the image is an illustration depicting the water cycle. It shows a sky blue background with fluffy white clouds. It starts talking about the droplets labeled transpiration towards the sky, evaporation, precipitation. So it's kind of highlighting some of the key parts and content from this image. And so that's one, this is a free tool that you could use to start to get some descriptions. You'll notice with like the alt text, it does like a decent job highlighting some of the key parts, but it may be, that doesn't really describe exactly the cycle of where it's going of where it's going as much. So like in the long description or the alt text, providing more of that, and potentially because it's this one's actually a little simpler. I had another one that was a more complex image of the water cycle, but the idea is like you want to make sure that you're hitting and describing each part that's really relevant to that image, and making sure that it's well understood. So like the long description would probably be better as you're looking at complex images, because the description wouldn't just be able to fit in that alt tag very well. So going back over to the image playground one here, I could then go in and ask it to describe an image. I can go and upload, maybe we can use this polar covalent bond one. And if I use the plus sign here, I can choose Google, and then we should get dual description from Google Gemini and ChatGPT trying to describe what the image is. So you could choose which description you like better. And depending on what your access is to the different platforms, you can kind of compare how it's being broken down there. So you'll notice like Google's talking about the left side of the image, and then it's talking about the middle and the right, and both of them are kind of having somewhat of a similar structure and describing like how those bonds are connecting. And depending on this, you would then want to go and be able to like edit it and get a better description. So that's something to consider. I think one more I'll show, which I thought was kind of cool, would be if we ask, can you turn this, can, uh, and I'm going to give it a math equation. And so if we go in, I can ask it to generate LaTeX, which is an accessible way of presenting the math to for the different equation here. And we could try and see um, if I put it into Canvas, we can get like a similar math equation. So we're taking what the image here is of the math, and then Canvas has a math equation generator, a math equation editor that can take LaTeX, and so it's converted this to LaTeX, and then this inaccessible image of math would then become a more accessible version of the math. I'm not sure. I think it got, is it 2A, 2A? This might be 2N. Oh no, it is 2A. Yeah, so I think I did that correctly. So we can see the image there. So that's kind of some of the different examples of how you might be looking at um, trying to use AI. I will stop here and just kind of see if there's any questions. If there's not, I can talk a little bit about bias in AI if there's time. So let me see where if there's any questions in the chat. One second. So that was just an image of a math formula that I found. It was not there was no like alt text for it or anything. It was just identifying that image, and then I asked it to convert it to LaTeX, and then I put the LaTeX into the Canvas equation editor, and it was able to display the math equation. So that's kind of what happened there. I
Okay, so
think
when
since, oh, sorry, go ahead.
you're uploading an image and it's got the formula, is it actually reading the formula or is it just processing the image? What is it actually doing?
I believe that the AI is trying to read that math equation and then figure out what the LaTeX expression would be
Okay,
based on that. So that's kind of how that was working.
okay,
Um,
that's interesting.
And then I think since there may not be as many questions, I'll just take a sec. If there's a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. But I thought I would just talk a little bit about um, some other things. Wait, oh, sorry. One second. I want to share my screen again, and then I could talk a little bit about bias and AI and some things to be aware of. So one of the things that is kind of currently impacting AI is people with disabilities are not as included in the AI data sets. And so, for example, when I gave Dolly 3 this prompt of including people with a variety of different disabilities, it generated this image of a lot of people using wheelchairs next to like the stairs, and there's kind of it seemed like it was sort of generating because of like the access symbol is, in an office environment is usually near like the restroom. It seemed like a lot of the decor on the wall was more restroom related, but it really did not understand including people with disabilities. And I actually redid this in recently in 2025, and the image changed slightly, and now there's inclusion of like service animals and someone using a cane, and it's like a park environment, so it's a little bit better in terms of some representation, but there's still not like a representation of like invisible disabilities or someone with dyslexia, for example. So it just kind of shows that people with disabilities need to be included more in the AI process for generating like the apps and the different content and the models themselves, so that they can understand people with disabilities. This is like another example. A famous YouTuber, Footless Joe. She has like 1 million subscribers on YouTube. She was Her videos were getting censored by YouTube's algorithm because she uses a prosthetic leg, and it was basically censoring them as like 18 plus videos because of that. And so she did like a quick campaign to her followers and like fellow YouTubers to raise awareness, and then YouTube was able to reverse that. But that again kind of goes to like the AI making the decision first instead of a human reviewing it, and having people with disabilities be included in the models for those types of things. There's also issues with AI in terms of employment. For example, AI has been being used to screen resumes, and a lot of times that there's like a gap in someone's work history, AI will flag that and not want to include that person, and that can discriminate against people with disabilities who may have a gap because they had some type of flare up with like a chronic disability or something, and so suddenly AI is eliminating them from the pool because of that gap. Or another example is a lot of times now there's been video interviews where AI is analyzing the vocal patterns and facial expressions of the people interviewing, and that can lead to the AI lacking an understanding of the broad range of people with different disabilities and their patterns for speech and facial expression, so that someone who maybe is neurodiverse ends up being discriminated against in the job application process. So those are again more reasons to include a wide range of people uh, in the AI's algorithm. And I think I have just to note, like in this, there's more kind of information about this and different ways to kind of AIs being used and some of the issues around fairness and discrimination, the different articles that I linked to um, in that resources document. So I think I will leave it there. There's no other questions. I hope this presentation was helpful, and thank you so much for attending.